All those lifetimes spent to preserve a single vital secret. I would expect a man to reconsider his choices after the first 500 years.
That's the servant down, and the mistress still to go. A good start, worthy of being built upon.
Theos followed his mistress's orders too well. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that he will remember this again one day, after he makes it through the wheel.
He was good at serving his god, I give him that. He should have picked a better one.
All those lives. And at the end of them, he was no better than the very people he sought to guide. A pity he would ever have to face that realization again.
Was there nothing there worth saving? Forgive me. I know you chose wisely.
It is an ending, even if there is little justice in it.
You once grew fat while others spent the currency of their lives in your service. I would gladly rend your back with the lash, taking interest for every drop of blood you spilt, every scrap of flesh you scarred. But my mistress would appeal to your sense of perspective, for you know that all things have their place. You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hodrit House, those well-bred thieves with their lordly pretensions, the wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor and receiving riddles and visions in response. And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you? The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron. Finish the work Theos began. Strengthen Woodica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favored. Yes, consider well the prosperous lives and the power that awaits you. I'm certain you'll choose well.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the lost souls of the Hollowborn were funneled back into the churn of Bareth's wheel to find their way into new vessels and partake in the life they had been denied during Whitewind's legacy. Though parents of Hollowborn would remain just that, the end of Whitewind's legacy would bring about a spate of new, healthy births, with many of the infants bearing souls once meant for Hollowborn children. The natural cycle of life and death had been restored to Deerwood, and with it came a renewed faith in the providence of the gods. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But order would soon come from an unexpected source. House Dominel, realizing that stability was good for business, brought the city's criminal elements in line through a systematic campaign of fear and intimidation. Capitalizing on the mutual antipathy of the Dozens and the Knights of the Crucible, House Dominel continued to manipulate both groups from the shadows, ensuring their decline and eventually supplanting their authority in Defiance Bay. Defiance Bay was served well by the Dominel's rise. Their subtle political maneuvers and lack of legal oversight allowed them to broker a number of favorable trade deals, rekindling the city's economy. Although their cautious approach in the legacy's aftermath had perhaps denied them broad notoriety outside of Defiance Bay, House Dominel's wealth and influence both continued to grow unchecked. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been drained of its accumulated essence, the machine had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay. But those who had escaped the melee in the palace hearings remembered the testimonies of the strange guest who had shown up that day and absolved animancy, implicating the leaden key instead. The rumor spread quickly, and soon the popular belief was that the assassin had been a leaden key spy. When the legacy had lifted, people came to see it not as a sign that the riots had been according to the god's wishes, as Theos had hoped, but as a confirmation that animancy had never been the source of the problem in the first place. Deerwoodans instead convinced themselves that the riots had somehow purged Defiance Bay of leaden key spies, and that the end of Widewind's legacy was their well-deserved reward. The rage against animancers was quickly forgotten, and those who had survived were permitted to return to Brackenbury Sanitarium and rebuild it so they might resume their studies. The town of Deerford had seen the last of the cult of Scan. Dark rumors about the town's many curses quickly faded, and travelers soon returned. Abidon was restored but tempered, and the compromise that he and Andra sought played out in the Deerwood too. Skilled labor saw a revival in the Deerwood, and the country's architects, engineers, and masons transformed the broken nation into a modern marvel. Defiance Bay was rebuilt into a grand capital, and the roads that connected the country were paved into broad highways. On the other hand, expeditions to Engwithan ruins steadily declined, and the Deerwood found a more stable, peaceful relationship with Eir Glanfath. With the Eyeless defeated, Stalwart redoubled its efforts to unlock the mysteries of Durgan Steel and create new marvels upon the White Forge. However, the villagers also realized that they would never achieve their ambitions on their own. To that end, they set aside their grievances and welcomed newcomers, Deerwoodan and Raidsaran alike, to their town. Stalwart grew not only as a hub for mining and metalworking, but also as a trading outpost, which Durgan's battery stood ready to protect. With this newfound prosperity came a generation of peace. The Flames That Whisper clan found a cautious peace with Stalwart, particularly once the villagers heard of the aid the ogres had offered against the Eyeless. The clan moved back into the Russet Wood, and as Stalwart grew in prestige, the villagers formed a tighter alliance with their ogre neighbors. Within a generation, ogre traders visited Stalwart, and village hunters were welcome in the Russet Wood. Zawa came to peace with the end of the Takan people and decided instead to start anew. He traveled to Defiance Bay, where he took up residence with the Scribners of the Hand Occult for a time. He spent his time there writing down everything he could remember of the Takan and their way of life. When he was finished, the voluminous set of tomes was given to the Hall of Revealed Mysteries so that the Takan legacy might live on. Free from the burden of her memory, Maneha soon left the gift-bearers and resumed adventuring. Now that she had a taste for the world, she wanted to experience it anew. Maneha rediscovered her zest for battle, extravagance, and romance. She kept her gaze on the horizon, looking from one journey to another more distant, from the lover in her arms to another more fervent. Hers was a life of excitement, violence, and passion. She moved too quickly for regret to catch up with her, and she hoped only that she might outpace it in the next life as well. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodanians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. After the death of the Master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Ad Nua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Odnua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Pallegina had followed her orders from the Duke's bells, helping establish an exclusive trade arrangement between the Valian republics and the tribes of Erglonfath. With the Deerwood's people still weakened by Widewind's legacy, the Valian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. The Deerwoods suffered as terribly from the lost trade as the republics benefited from it. Pallegina was honored for her service by being assigned as the personal guard of the Duchess of Spirento. Despite her success, she regretted the choices she had made along the way. With your business concluded, Haravius quietly took his leave and headed home to Thane Bog. The elders of the Fisher Crane had not warmed to Haravius in his absence, and when he arrived, he was denounced and scorned. Haravius spoke of his deeds and of his communion with Galawain, yet none would support his petition to return to the tribe. One by one, starting with the oldest, Haravius challenged each member of the council to single combat, humiliating the Riau in a series of savage duels. With half the council bloodied and shamed, the elders at last acknowledged Haravius's strength, announcing him a hunter of the Fisher Crane tribe. Upon being granted this title, Haravius calmly left the village and embarked again on his life of wandering. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Through a number of quiet inquiries, he soon found his way into the underground organization of Aethasians known as the Night Market. Ironically, in learning that the gods had been fabricated, Adair found his faith in Aethus renewed, and that his god was neither alive nor truly a god had become irrelevant. He rose quickly through the ranks of the Night Market for his optimism and for his bold leadership, his ultimate goal to make the Deerwood a place that would welcome followers of the Shining God once again. When the dust settled in Sun and Shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ix Arcanon, his former master. He saw where the Grandmaster had gone wrong, and he knew what he would do better. The secret of the gods would be preserved, and with it, the sanity and well-being of all Kith. He donned the remains of Theos's ceremonial garb and prepared himself for the long and lonely task ahead. With both their aims fulfilled, Kanarua bid the Watcher farewell and sailed back to his beloved Rawatai. There, he reported on his findings to the Lore College. Kana spoke of the Engwithan people, describing both their vile experiments and their inspiring accomplishments. He spoke too of the destruction of the tablet by the Leaden Key, and the group's efforts to erase the Engwithan legacy from the world. Both inspiration and cautionary tales, he said, could be found in the world beyond Rawatai's borders. Kana urged his people to continue to pursue knowledge abroad, so that the lessons found there might benefit Tekoa. Kana's inability to prove his theory of Engwithan influence diminished his academic standing, but his passion drew much interest from those less concerned with degrees. Kana swiftly became an influential figure in the move toward a more collaborative approach to expansion on the northern continent. In his personal life, he came to enjoy the reputation of an affable eccentric, willing to share grand and impossible secrets, along with a drink and a song. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun and Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. Durrance used Magrin's strength only until Theos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. Sagani experienced the 4 months of her journey back to Masuk in vivid colors. She strove to memorize every moment of her final trip through the Deerwood, Erglonfoth, the Valian Republics, and beyond, preparing to tell her village of what she had seen on her long journey. All of Masuk shared in her triumph, and she felt her pride and elation magnified by the joy of her village. Never again did she doubt the value of her sacrifices. After decades as a long hunter, Sagani finally became one of Masuk's most respected elders. She guided her community with wise counsel, and a generation after she finally passed, another huntress journeyed into the world to find her soul. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead, made no easier by your decision to bring an infant to Sun and Shadow.